Never in the history of fighting anime has there been a character that can effectively pull off a name as ridiculous as Biscuit with such casual flair. And yet, when you see Biscuit Oliva for the first time, it's clear that this is a guy who has built his entire life around one thing: strength. Biscuit Oliva is one of the few characters in the Baki series who has the acknowledgement of Yujiro Hanma, the strongest creature in the world, and the reason behind that probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're both brute force experts of sorts. While Yujiro can make world governments topple with his mighty strength, Biscuit Oliva uses his brute power to subdue criminals all over the world, despite being one himself. He's under constant surveillance via satellite for a reason, and that reason, frankly speaking, is his insane anatomy. Because Biscuit Oliva might just be something other than human, given some of the things his body has been shown to be capable of withstanding since his introduction. So let's get into it without any further delay. This is Biscuit Oliva's Anatomy Explored. He's inspired by a man who was called The Myth, Sergio Oliva, aka Mr. Olympia. As you might know by now, many side characters in Baki are inspired by real-life figures that were involved in some form of physical contest throughout their lives. Antonio Igari is plainly inspired by the Japanese wrestling legend Antonio Inoki. Manny Akio from the second part of Baki Hanma Season 2 is supposed to be Manny Pacquiao, even though he got his butt handed to him by Retsu. And Muhammad Ali Jr.'s inspiration is plain as day. Biscuit Oliva's was a bit harder to place because the inspiration for his design doesn't come from combat sports, though it does come from the realm of pure physicality itself. His size might be what confused us at first, given that he's a 6'3" giant in the show, but when you look at his face and physique closely, you realize that the inspiration behind Mr. Biscuit is none other than the myth Sergio Oliva. Well, the last name's give it away too, but you get what we mean. Sergio Oliva might as well have been an anime character himself, because his early life played out like a movie. Born in Cuba in 1941, Sergio Oliva was earmarked for bodybuilding success from a very young age. He could perform clean and jerks in excess of 400 pounds as a teenager with a little over a year of weightlifting training, and this brought him onto the Cuban government's radar, which put him on the national team for the 1961 Pan American Games. Oliva went to the Games as a Cuban and left as an American refugee, because after winning silver at the Games, which is quite impressive at just 20 years old, he dashed to the American consulate in Jamaica, where the Games were being held, and asked for and was granted political asylum. He emigrated to the US and was relocated to Miami, where he worked as a TV repairman for a number of years, before shifting to Chicago, where his myth began to take shape. Sergio Oliva had always been into lifting weights, but after joining the fabled Midwest mecca of muscle, aka the Duncan YMCA in Chicago, he switched to bodybuilding and turned into an international sensation. The title of Mr. Olympia is synonymous with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has won it a record 7 times, but his only loss came to the myth Sergio Oliva in the year 1969. In his 1977 autobiography, Arnold recalls that he understood why people called Oliva the Myth when he competed against him for the title of Mr. Olympia in 1969. Arnold was 6'2" at the height of his career. He was nicknamed the Austrian Oak for a reason. Sergio Oliva's height is 5'10", and yet Schwarzenegger recalls getting the sense that Oliva was towering over him. He calls it one of the clearest instances of defeat in his entire professional career, and seeing Oliva's physique at his peak years, it's hard to fault Arnold's own analysis. Sergio Oliva was a genetic freak who pretty much introduced the idea of a V-waist to mainstream bodybuilding with his ultra-slim waist and his ultra-jacked everything else. The head is the biggest and heaviest part of the human body, but when Oliva flexed his muscles, his biceps seemed almost bigger than his head. He won the Mr. Olympia title 3 consecutive times from 1967 to 69, with his win in 68 going uncontested. When you compare his look to the Biscuit Oliva we're talking about in this video, you can see a few major changes, sure, but you can also see the glaring similarities. If you were to put the two Olivas side by side in a pose-off, they'd appear pretty much the same, except one of them would be taller by about 5 inches. And yet, that's an extremely important aspect of this video, because in a combat situation, those 5 inches mean everything, especially when they have the power of brute force behind them. So now that we've told you about the inspiration behind Biscuit Oliva's characterization, let's talk about the man himself. He's called in as a last resort to capture the world's most dangerous convicts, but he debuts as damage control for Yujiro Hanma, Biscuit Oliva's introduction to the Baki series. Mr. Unchained showing up in the final episode at the end of a season seems to be a trend, because in Baki 2018 he was introduced in the last episode of the first season, but his actual debut took place in the last episode of Baki the Grappler, released 17 years before that. In the final episode of Baki the Grappler Season 2, Yujiro Hanma is in the middle of decimating guerrillas in the South American narcotic zone when the US president at the time decides that he's lost enough men already. He sends in the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, and Delta Force to no avail. Yujiro was closing in on America's target quick, a South American drug lord, so the US president decided to send in the world's strongest convict/bounty hunter to get the job done first. Biscuit Oliva turns up at the drug lord's mansion and takes out all of his security and the target himself, just as Yujiro shows up for a confrontation of epic proportions. According to the series, Biscuit Oliva migrated to the US from Cuba, much like his real-life inspiration, but that's about where the similarities come to an end. Oliva made his living as a special kind of mercenary, a bounty-hunting criminal. His home was the Arizona State Prison, which also happened to be where the US puts its most dangerous criminals for incarceration, and Oliva was the place's undisputed jailer. He would usually be deployed in high-risk scenarios, which involved taking out dangerous criminals stateside, or, like in the final episode of Grappler Baki Season 2, single-handedly dismantling a drug cartel. Oliva was excited to go up against the fabled ogre from Japan, but he ended up feeling both honored and insulted by what happened next. Yujiro Hanma recognized Oliva by his nickname Unchained, which is a reference to the fact that Oliva is the only inmate of Arizona State Prison granted the freedoms of a VVIP, and all of it is down to his brute strength, something Yujiro respects. Oliva was immensely flattered by this because he knew Yujiro's reputation and was amazed that the man knew his own. It also stoked the flames of his fighting appetite because acknowledgement from the world's strongest creature is the kind of thing most fighters would care about. Biscuit Oliva prepares to attack Yujiro, thinking that the man would fight him, but Yujiro dismisses Oliva as a meal that hasn't been cooked enough. Though Yujiro acknowledges Biscuit Oliva's strength, he is an unparalleled genius in martial arts and brute force fighting, and he can immediately tell that Oliva is not yet at the level where he can give Yujiro some fun. He comments that eating Oliva would not be joyful enough at that moment, and by eating, he of course means utterly annihilating him in a contest of strength, but Biscuit Oliva isn't having it. The opportunity to fight a man called the world's strongest presents itself very rarely, so he takes a swing at Yujiro unprompted. If it had been anyone else, what happened next would have killed them instantly. The mere fact that Oliva survived is proof enough that he was top 3 in terms of raw power quite early on in the series. Yujiro ducks Biscuit Oliva's cheap shot and hits him with a kick so hard, the momentum ends up carrying them across the room. Now, keep in mind, Biscuit Oliva is not a small guy. Sure, when he's got a shirt on, or especially a tuxedo, he can seem a little chunky, but the fact of the matter is that all of that is pure, rock-hard muscle, and the fact that Yujiro could even move Oliva an inch with a kick is remarkable, because in Baki 2018, we're shown that Biscuit Oliva's center of gravity feels like a massive oak tree or a huge sky crane to a regular human being. But having brought up Baki 2018, let's dive into Oliva's appearances there, because they give us far more information on the anatomical freak that is Biscuit Oliva than this one semi-canon appearance in an anime that came out in 2001. And we call it semi-canon because, while it's true that Yujiro and Oliva know of each other through their reputations in the manga, the entire sequence in the South American narcotic zone is anime exclusive. Oliva's actual debut takes place during the world's most dangerous convicts arc, and it's frankly much more badass than his 2001 inclusion. He can tank shotgun pellets with his bare skin and heal the wounds by eating steaks. The freakish anatomy of Biscuit Oliva. After learning that the world's most dangerous convicts were headed to Tokyo to learn the taste of defeat, and seeing how two of them, Speck and Dorian, treated the law like a joke, Japanese Police Commissioner Morio Sonoda was forced to admit that this problem needed a fight fire with fire approach. Though he was against what he saw as consorting with a criminal, Sonoda had to admit that the man most suited to the job of taking out the world's most dangerous criminals would be the world's strongest criminal himself. He travels to Arizona State Prison personally to seek out said criminal and is shocked by the lavish treatment that he receives. But what shocks him even more is the man himself. He expected a convict and got a connoisseur, and a fancy one at that. Biscuit Oliva lived in extraordinary lavishness, surrounding himself with classical art and literature and the finest wines and meats in the entire world. Sonoda is stunned that a convict is getting treated like this, but he understands why after he accompanies Oliva on a day on the job. They track down a man by the name of Jeff Markson, a corrupt cop that Oliva had beaten up back in the day and who had now turned to a life of crime in search of revenge. Jeff took a building full of hostages and used it as bait for Oliva so that he could have his long-awaited rematch with the guy, but it turns out it was all for nothing. Jeff Markson uses a shotgun on Biscuit Oliva from close range, but all the pellets do is bounce off his body, and the crazy thing is, he hadn't even hardened his muscles to absorb the impact. His natural musculature is so thick and heavy that it can tank pretty much anything coming at him, from knives and katanas to bullets and shotgun shells. And Biscuit Oliva attributes this toughness not to some secret technique, but to a secret trick used by bare-knuckle fighters. In the real world, the application of coarse salt on the skin over an extended period of time can cause it to thicken up and harden to a good extent. This was commonly observed among sailors, who would often be forced to face the harsh saltwater environs of the sea and oceans of the world, leaving them with skin that was tougher than that of, say, the trader whose goods they were lugging across the water. In boxing, many fighters rub salt on their bodies to help make them more resistant to cuts and blows, but the fact that Oliva attributes his shotgun pellet tanking skin to this trick is nothing more than anime logic. No amount of salt can make the human body resistant to a close-range shotgun blast, but that's kind of the point of Biscuit Oliva's inhuman anatomy. Even Sikorsky, one of the convicts Oliva was contracted to chase down, who used his knuckles to cut up his targets' bodies, was unable to dent Oliva's skin with his unique attack style. He left Antonio Igari looking like Hanayama, but couldn't do jack when it came to Biscuit Oliva. Jeff Markson's close-range blast was unable to pierce Oliva's skin, but it did leave massive dents in it, akin to what would happen if you took a sledgehammer to a sheet of metal. But Biscuit Oliva doesn't just have tough skin, he also has a neck made of steel. Now, for a regular human being, the neck is probably the most important joint in their anatomy. The neck is the juncture between the head and the body, and it is usually one of the most vulnerable parts of the human anatomy in that neck damage can cause permanent damage to a regular human being. This is why you often hear of professional wrestlers' careers ending sooner than expected, because pro wrestling often involves one competitor dumping another competitor squarely on their back and shoulders, and executing such moves without perfection can lead to terrifying things. Mike Tyson, one of the toughest fighters in the world, used to train his neck as much as his body because he knew the importance of having a strong bride between his head and his body. Tyson has tanked many a punch in his career thanks to his absurdly thick neck, but Biscuit Oliva might just have a tree trunk for a neck. Once Jeff saw that firearms were no use against his opponent, he decided to end the fight by necking Oliva with all his might. A regular human might have died from the impact, but to the strongest American alive, it was akin to a fly buzzing around his head. That much was enough to trigger Oliva into taking lethal action against Jeff. He prepares his fist for a massive punch and sends Jeff flying out of a second-story window and down into the street below with a sickening thud. In a single move, Oliva ends a fight that would usually have any other human being crapping their pants. And that's not the only crazy thing about his anatomy. Remember those dents we spoke of a moment ago? The ones that appeared on his body thanks to him tanking shotgun blasts? Well, if you saw the title of this section, you know how he healed them, but you will only believe it when you see it, which is why we urge you to seek out episode 13 and 14 of Baki 2018, because you'll understand why this guy has a mural dedicated to him inside of a US state penitentiary, despite being a convicted felon. Biscuit Oliva consumes an inhuman amount of food to maintain his inhuman muscle mass. He's 6'3", over 100 kilos of pure muscle, so to recuperate, he needs to eat 10,000 calorie meals. That's right, you heard us correctly, each meal he has is a 10K calorie challenge. And when he's injured after a fight, his menu changes to eating just steak, after consuming multiple kilos of which his body starts regenerating at an insane speed. Watching Oliva eat, Sonoda notes that it hasn't even been half a day since Oliva was shot with a shotgun at near point-blank range, and yet his wounds already had a thin layer of skin growing underneath them, which goes to show the insane recovery speed of Biscuit Oliva's physical anatomy. Now, you might be asking, well, hold on a minute, even if his body abides to the laws of anime, surely he must do something to burn off all those calories he's consuming, because otherwise Biscuit Oliva would spend half of his screen time in the washroom. Well, he does train, but what he does to train can hardly be called conventional training. That's because Biscuit Oliva lugs trucks for his jogs and pulls attack helicopters to the earth as a means of keeping his muscles battle-ready and in check. If he doesn't do this kind of intense training, Oliva claims his muscles might blow up out of his frame and crush the very facility that he calls home. But his delivery of this line makes it clear that he's at least 80% joking. The musculatures of professional bodybuilders are often show muscles, not go muscles. But Biscuit Oliva is not Sergio the Myth, and all his muscles are ready to go against any given threat at any any given time. In Baki Do, it is revealed that Oliva consistently lifts weights in excess of 500 kilos, a feat that can only be performed by strongmen like Eddie Hall in the real world. After subduing Sikorsky with a little assist from Baki Hanma, Oliva was researching his next target at the Japanese police headquarters when he was ambushed by one of his marks, Hector Doyle. Doyle disguised himself as a policewoman and entered Oliva's research room under the guise of serving him coffee. He used one of his multiple body modifications to slash into Biscuit Oliva's iron skin, but his aim wasn't cutting down the big man. The blades embedded within Hector Doyle's body were laced with a powerful drug that usually knocked out his opponents within an instant. However, the inhuman anatomy of Biscuit Oliva took several minutes to even register that a foreign substance had entered his bloodstream, and even after that, Doyle's drug did not have its intended effect. Doyle had wanted to use the drug to incapacitate the Unchained. Instead, he ended up making Oliva slightly drowsy at best. Not only did Biscuit resist the effects of the drug thanks to his sheer muscle mass and unique physiology, he was able to drive Doyle into retreat, and when they met each other the next time, Oliva crushed Doyle's back with his bare hands just to prove a point. And despite never having trained in any form of martial arts, preferring brute strength as his modus operandi, Biscuit Oliva has proven himself to have prodigious potential when it comes to the art of fighting. When he was in Japan, he fought the entire judo team of the police force on a whim of acquiring a black belt. Oliva was running through his competition with his brute strength, but Sonoda checked him by saying what he was doing was not legal in the rules of judo. He would only acknowledge Oliva's fights if he scored an ippon throw-over knockdown, and Oliva immediately adapted his style and started scoring perfect ippons from that point onwards. It was also during this absolute mockery session of judo that we saw Oliva's center of gravity, which is akin to an ancient oak with its roots dug deep into the earth, or a gigantic sky crane that lifts tons of steel to help create buildings. During the Great Rai Tai tournament, Oliva went up against Shoban Ron, an undefeated underground fighter from East Asia whose signature fighting style saw him keep his hands inside his pockets. Shoban Ron was one of the first people to be able to demonstrably cut through Oliva's skin when it wasn't hardened, and he landed a few good blows on Biscuit using his hand pocket stance. But Oliva not only taunted him by copying it, he added his own twist to the move and defeated Shoban Ron using his brute strength speciality. Also, once Oliva took a match seriously, he would harden his own skin, which he does against Shoban Ron, whose fingers break upon making contact with Oliva's abs. One more thing to chalk up in the freak anatomy column for Biscuit Oliva, but we aren't done talking about him just yet. Oliva might not be a martial artist by nature, but he sure knows and loves contests of strength because he engages in several across the series. There are two in particular that we want to talk about, as they both show his greatest strengths and his greatest weaknesses. He can come out on top of any situation that doesn't involve a Hanma. Why Biscuit Oliva causes the world GPS systems to malfunction during his fights. Because of his sheer brute strength and everything else we've mentioned in the previous section, Biscuit Oliva has the distinction of being one of 3 people in the world that are under constant satellite surveillance. The other 2 are Yujiro Hanma, obviously, and another man who resides within the Arizona State Prison like Oliva, Jun Guevara. Guevara was infamously called Mr. Second within the prison, not because he was second only to Biscuit Oliva in there in terms of strength, but because he was the only one who could succeed Oliva for the title of Unchained. Guevara was a strong man, no doubt. He managed to take on the 3-man tag team called Mouth all by himself and beat them into submission, something that had never been accomplished in the history of Arizona State Prison. For comparison, the trio had just nearly beaten Baki's equivalent of Mike Tyson nearly to death before Guevara intervened. And Jun managed to permanently disable their teamwork by permanently incapacitating one of their teammates. He also did pretty much whatever he wanted within the prison thanks to his unparalleled strength, and had a deadly finishing maneuver that saw him burst his opponent's eardrums first, then use the strands of his own hair to chop up their cochlea and leave them to bleed to death or get shot by the guards instead. He tries to use the same move on Oliva and manages to get his hair inside his opponent's ear, but that's about as far as he gets. We told you that Biscuit Oliva performed 2 feats of strength that showed his strengths and weaknesses as a fighter, and this is the first one. Guevara challenges Oliva to a game of lose-or-lose for their showdown for the title of Unchained. Lose-or-lose is basically a type of duel where the 2 participants hold either end of a handkerchief and slug each other until one of them lets go of their grip, thus signifying their loss. Oliva not only tanks each of Guevara's concussion-giving blows, he keeps escalating the stakes by making his grip looser and looser until he finally comes down to the Gilberto style, which is basically designed to make the user lose. The Gilberto style pretty much lays the handkerchief on an open palm, and despite doing so, Oliva still manages to put the fear of God inside Guevara. He punches the rebel president so hard that Guevara gets plastered into the prison yard wall, and when Oliva finally gets serious, he lands a full power blow on him that causes the GPS systems of the world to malfunction. Guevara and Oliva were both under constant satellite surveillance, and when either of them moved faster than 40 kilometers per hour, it caused problems in global navigation. You can put together the speed and velocity with which Guevara flew off after receiving a full power punch from Oliva yourselves as a fun little exercise, but we'll settle for the vague yet accurate descriptive phase a lot. However, this entire fight exposed Oliva's biggest weakness to his real opponent for Baki Hanma Season 1, Baki himself, and that was his ungodly pride. Biscuit Oliva was the only convict in the world who could call himself Mr. Unchained. Thanks to his brute strength, which is acknowledged by the ogre Yujiro Hanma himself, he has managed to attain freedom unimaginable for a convict like himself. Yet, at the same time, the trappings of that vanity have come to define his character, and especially his title as Unchained. All Baki had to do to provoke Oliva into a fight, which he said was impossible until Baki proved himself, was to attack Oliva's ego by proving that he too could become unchained in a matter of minutes if he wanted to. Baki cuddled up to Oliva's girlfriend during his encounter with Jun Guevara to goad the two into fighting for real and ending things like fighters. And he kept attacking Oliva's pride even after the man took a literal piss on Baki while he was in solitary. Biscuit Oliva might have the strength to pummel Baki through 4 concrete walls and a reinforced steel door. He might have the power to put Baki a sixth the way deep into a grave. He might have the wherewithal to turn into a human Pac-Man and give Baki no opportunity to grab his corners, but the moment he allowed Baki's words to get to him was when he had lost the fight. Despite taking a beating that would have killed a normal person, Baki relied on his provocation of Oliva to trigger the flow of the brain drug that unlocks the Hanma family's secret fighting technique, the Demon Face. Baki's back rearranges itself to resemble the face of an Oni, and from that point onward, it was game, set, and match Hanma. Baki pummeled the crap out of Biscuit Oliva and drove him out of Arizona State Prison's walls using nothing but his own sheer strength, which caused both Oliva and Yujiro to acknowledge the boy's growth. And speaking of Yujiro, that's where the second contest of strength happens that ends up exposing Oliva's weaknesses. Because while he might be the strongest American on Earth, he's no match for anyone that much stronger than him. Before his showdown with Baki, Yujiro goes to Arizona State for a brief encounter with Oliva. The contest is a simple test of strength where both competitors lock up and the one who can subdue the other with their might wins. Oliva goes into it fully prepared and Yujiro puts on boxing gloves as a handicap for himself, yet he still ends up absolutely crushing Oliva with no effort. We'd imagine a similar result would be achieved by someone like Pickle, whose raw power levels have been speculated to be somewhere around Yujiro's level. In Baki Do, Oliva finally meets a match for his raw physicality in Nome no Sukune II, as the sumo wrestler breaks Biscuit's ribs in a traditional sumo match. But after recovering from his injuries, Biscuit proves that Sukune was pretty much Muhammad Ali Jr. in a real fight with no rules, because he defeats the sumo pretty easily in comparison to his last performance against him this time around. It's safe to say that if you want to survive a fight with Biscuit Oliva, you must be either exceptionally strong, exceptionally skilled at martial arts, or possess the silver tongue of the devil, because talk no jutsuing your way out of a fight with anyone from the Baki franchise is a surefire way to get yourself killed. And if your opponent pulls helicopters as a training exercise to keep himself fit, do you even want to go up against him in the first place? Marvelous verdict. You can answer that question for us in the comment section down below. But as for this video, that's all we've got for you today. Biscuit Oliva is one of the most iconic characters from the Baki franchise, and most of it comes down to his insane anatomy, as we've shown you guys today. Let us know why you love Mr. Unchained. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Baki content, and we'll see you guys in the next one.